So, yes. Okay, so I guess I'll bring it up in the bigger meeting. But we're supposed to pick up one from those three?
Out of those three, so yeah, Stroman, Mission Valley, or Stroman Shields. And I know we had Stroman as number one on ours originally. Does that stay there?
I would like to say yes, because it sounded like multiple other groups were bringing up the tax increase, right? And how they're wanting to stay lower, and that one's lower. But that's just my thoughts. Anybody else?
Number two, because we all can agree on Stroman is number.
Mr. Gregg, we have a question because we're outside of the box thinkers.
No problem.
So with our comment earlier about the possibility of, is there a chance that we could have a high priority needs proposition A and then add on a Stroman proposition B? Because like Natalie said earlier, and I'm sorry, Natalie, I've got to quote you. She can live without a shiny school, but she can't live without AC any longer. And so if a bond that has Stroman in it fails, then everything fails. Natalie does not get her AC.
Yes, the easy short answer to your question is yes, that is an option for a school district to consider, is to offer packages, or I'm not sure the exact term I should be using, but you can have a proposition A, which is rebuild a campus, and you can have a proposition B, which is specific to repairs. And so if that ultimately is strategically what the task force believes would be the best approach to garner community support, then I would encourage the task force to have that be a part of what's embedded in their recommendations for the board to consider ultimately.
Okay, I'm hearing you.
That's not a right or a wrong. That's strategically, one way may be more appropriate than the other. We've certainly had those conversations over the course of time in working with bond programs. And sometimes school districts feel like at this time it's right to have everything in one package. Sometimes they feel like it's an appropriate time to have it separated. So it happens both ways in school districts.
Okay.
We do have flexibility.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, great question.
All right, guys.
They won't scream. And that's at the low end, $150 more a year for a $200,000 home.
Well, and the people I think that will have a harder time with the tax increase are the people that their homes are already paid off and they pay their taxes all at once.
That's me.
They're going to see that increase more than people that are paying that into their escrow account each month.
Yeah.
You know, it's not going to be as big a deal for them to have
So
someone
get that monthly going in there, you know, that $10 to $13 a month more for
right.
that.
Ready. I think we're ready, Greg. You're on mute.
Yeah, it's going to be.
Thank you, Francis.
Yeah,
I'm going to check in with the other groups and I'll let you know. I'll bring you back in as soon as I hear a yes from every group that they're ready.
We're not changing.
Good deal.
Shields. I don't know. Could we consider go back to our first conversation when we talked about keeping it to the 12 cents, but having the district reprioritize some of those things that they were going to put in high priority to bring it down to the 12 cents and do the Stroman Shields.
So, Greg, do you want us to actually change our choices on here? Has anybody else talked about that? Or are we just reporting out?
Yeah, if y'all will just report out.
Okay.
We can ultimately type it into the master group. We'll have everyone speaking, so.
Okay.
Are y'all still working right now? It's okay if you are.
I think
I'm good with scenario 3 as our top choice.
yeah, it sounds like we've settled on
Switching them.
switching them. So essentially, Greg, we would report out of the 3 that had votes here, which one we would choose. Is that what we're supposed to be doing?
I'm asking you to reevaluate of those 3 that have votes, Stroman Mission Valley, or Stroman Shields. If you were forced as a small group to choose a number 1, what would it be?
Okay, perfect. I think we're prepared to do that.
Awesome. I've got you checked off my list here.
And Celeste, you'll serve as our spokesperson again.
Yes, so we're going with scenario 3 as our top choice, right?
Yes.
We've
Yes.
gone back.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, 10 or 12 times, maybe 15 times more.
Yeah.
What I don't understand about our state legislature, they want to get the sales tax, but they want us to cut our property tax. But they're not interested in cutting the sales tax.
I think Dr. Bonewald's going to ask if we're ready to jump back into the large group there.
All right, I've got 2 more groups to check on. I'll be pulling you in shortly.
All right.
That's why I was saying I think it's so important, because if there's, you know, they trust the leaders within VISD, and if they're saying, hey, if this school don't get rebuilt, it's not gonna be safe. It's gonna be bad for the children. It's not safe, and we're gonna be throwing our money away because this is gonna be the first school that needs to be rebuilt. You know, and when the community hears that, even if they're not looking up stuff, like you're right, they're not looking things up, so they're gonna go with the only things they hear.
That
So you're right.
justification, that's going to be difficult to sell, because we said that what's now the Liberty Campus, back then it was VHS Memorial. We need to get out of this building. We need to get out of this building because it's in disrepair. We didn't get out of that building. We built two new high schools.
That's what I'm saying. And so then, well, that's what I'm asking for. I'm wanting to know: is it a building that's going to last longer, or is it needs to go now? It's just too much. That's kind of, you're saying they made that other building last. Is that the kind of that? But Stroman, they could sell it, because I don't think they're going to keep that building if they build a new one.
Oh. Would have to be rebuilt on site. It would have to be torn down.
Whereas Liberty Academy, they didn't tear it down. So
Right.
there's the argument for that one. But Stroman, if it's gone, it's gone.
Not wanting to rush you guys, just want to check in and see if y'all are at a point where you're ready with a first choice to report back out, or you need a little more time.
We have our first choice.
Okay. I'm going to check in with one more group, and then I'll pull y'all all back in as soon as they're ready. Thanks.
Make it real simple for the voter, and everybody wins.
I think that would be good. If you don't mind doing that, Mr. Zuck. Otherwise, I swear I would talk, but I have a screaming baby in the background.
Is this group ready to report back out?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm gonna pull everybody back together now. Thank you.
Turn on your microphone.
It's a protected cell, Megan. I can't type in it. Can you give me
Okay.
permission?
Yeah.
Or hey, you can do it. You have permission. You can type in here. Oh, it'll show up when you type if I have my screen. That's good. Okay. So in this column, let's go back through each group and see if you've decided to stay where you were for a first choice, or you've decided to change. So group 1, where are you?
We are number 1, but we did want to voice the opinion. We'd like to see playgrounds added back to all the elementary campuses.
Okay, and I just want to make sure before we go through this, I should say, again, this is an ongoing iterative process. So you're refining it down to a scenario for us, and then I'm going to make you stay a little bit longer to tell us those types of things. Hey, do this, but can you cut some of this, or do this? Can you get it down to this many pennies, or can you add this? We need to hear that from you. So thank you. Group 2, where are you, group 2?
I was going to say, do you really want to hear what I want to cut? But I think that's another discussion for another night.
I'll trust you. Group 2 rep, where did you land?
We decided to stay the same. We're still with Stroman being number 1.
Excellent. Thank you very much. How about group 3?
We've gone with scenario number 3 as our top choice now.
Stroman Mission Valley?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. How about group 4?
We're staying the same, Stroman Mission Valley.
Okay. How about group 5?
Group 5 is going with a proposal that we strongly believe that the most important thing for our schools is that all schools get repaired. But having a dual choice for the voters, a 0 increase for high priorities, and at 6 cents or whatever to add high priorities in Stroman.
Okay, would it be fair to say essentially we're saying scenario 1, but in the presentation and the voters, what they might see, that's an additional caveat to scenario 1?
No, priority 1, the one is a proposal number 6, where we say that you can vote for a 0 increase, and then if you want to increase, we can add Stroman into it. So we added a 6th scenario, sir, just to make sure that we get all of our buildings repaired, high priority.
How about group 6?
We went with scenario 1.
Okay, so we've gone through 2 rounds of this process at this point. We're at 4 of our small groups preferring Stroman. I'm putting the scenario 1, and I'm putting an asterisk by one of those in what Mr. Zook explained regarding group 5. And then we have 2 of the groups at Stroman/Mission Valley. Now I'm going to jump over to, well, let me ask you before I jump, are we able to get that down to 1 scenario as a task force? Or do we need to move forward with putting together additional refinement of those 2 scenarios?
What do you mean by additional refinement?
Okay. I'm looking for my mouse. Here we go. What I mean is I'm going to pull up one of the scenarios. I'm going to attempt to pull up one of the scenarios. Okay, so here's one of the 2 scenarios, all just by itself on a slide, the Stroman with repairs. And so we're looking at this right now. That represents somewhere in the ballpark of a 9 cent increase to the current INS rate. And that includes all high priority repairs and a Stroman rebuild. That could be presented as one proposition as a whole, or could potentially be broken up into two propositions, one being related to repairs and one being related to a rebuild of Stroman.
Greg, question.
Yes, sir.
Now that scenario that you were showing,
Yes, sir.
what was the high priority amount in Stroman? About 23
Yes,
million?
sir. It's about 23 million.
So if we were just looking at high priority, you're over 100 million. Is that about right?
Right. We were at around 109 million.
109 million, which exceeds the no increase anyway. Is that
Yes, sir.
correct?
That's
Okay, I
correct.
just want to make sure. So if we were going with no increase, you still would have to cut your high priority.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Potential. Yeah, to fit within the current INS rate, you'd have to do some cutting of high priority.
Oh, and what did you say again about breaking them up? Could potentially break them up?
So one of the questions from a small group was about how potential bond elections could be presented to the public. And there was a question about whether or not, instead of the entire bond proposal being within one proposition, a portion of it being specific just to the rebuild of a campus, such as Stroman in this scenario, and that would be one item that voters would vote on, and they'd vote yes or no specifically to rebuilding that campus, and a separate vote on priority repairs for other campuses. And so there's the potential for both of those to be successful, for both of them to not be successful, or for one to pass and the other not to pass.
That's if you did that.
I'm sorry, what's that, sir?
That's if you went forward and did do that during the election to break them up. I understand. Thank you.
Yes, sir. That's one option that the task force could consider as a recommendation. So we have this scenario one that involves repairs and a Stroman rebuild, and there's really no moving the line on the blue. There's the potential to, if the task force were to say, we like scenario one, but we feel like that total amount is more than the voters will say yes to, there's one option of breaking it apart. There's another option of considering whether you would want us to look among those high priority repairs and try to reduce that amount in some way to get to some level that you think the community would support within that scenario. That was less than the required INS tax increase that you see here. The conversation's really the same for scenario three that we had some of our groups prefer, in that there's really not much in moving the needle on the cost for the Stroman or the Mission Valley rebuild. And so the conversation would be around, if you believe that total of what's around 180 million to do all the remaining high priority repairs, is that something you believe the community would support? Or do you believe that we need to lessen that amount of repairs if going with that scenario? So I guess ultimately, we've got these two scenarios that we are down to potentially considering, one with Stroman rebuild and priority repairs, and the other with Stroman and Mission Valley rebuild and priority repairs. We have 4 subgroups saying we really like scenario 1 as our top scenario, and we have 2 subgroups saying we really like scenario 3 as our top scenario. If there are things about both of those scenarios that the task force would like us to modify, adjust in preparation for next week's meeting, in terms of what that bonding capacity is, what that tax rate impact is, that's what we're looking for feedback on, so that we can make this the best plan possible for this task force.
Greg, under Stroman, scenario 1 and scenario 3, if you limit it to the 6 cents and the cost that goes above the 6 cents, which of the repairs get moderated and which get accepted?
Specifically, we would have to come together with our maintenance leadership team and look at, campus by campus, facility by facility, do some internal prioritization, and come back to the task force and share that rationale and thought process and get your feedback on that as well. Ultimately, we'd want it to be something that made sense systemically if we were reducing which repairs are addressed initially. And we'd want to be on the same page with the task force around that. I'm going to ask groups 3 and 4 who preferred scenario 3 as their first top choice. Could you support scenario 1?
Yeah.
I think we could support it. I think one of the things that we thought made scenario 3 appealing is the fact that a rebuild of Mission Valley would probably get huge support in the community that's going to have the best voter turnout. And that might be, if you look at a carrot and a stick, that might get both of those campuses built and address some high priority items for the other campuses without getting to the 12 cents.
Other members of group 3 and 4 around whether or not you could support scenario 1 when your first choice in this process has been scenario 3?
I think Dr. Lawrence stated quite eloquently.
Yeah, I would, Dr. Lawrence as well. I think I could support scenario 1, but I really like the idea that we also hit an elementary and a target group that would be a high voter turnout.
And I don't think we're saying we can't support one. I don't think we're saying that at all. I think we're just trying to state for the rest of the members of the task force what is most appealing about 3 to us.
Are there any members of those subgroups who feel like they could not support scenario 1?
On scenario 1, we're looking at what'd y'all say, about a 9-cent increase, roughly?
As it currently stands, with a rebuild of Stroman and addressing all of the high priority repairs that have been identified, yes. And that would be my next question to this group. If we are able to get to one scenario to further refine potentially, is ultimately whatever recommendations this task force makes, we want them to be recommendations that the community is going to support and that will be successful. And as it stands right now, that's about a 9-cent increase.
And to add Mission Valley in, that's another 2 cents more?
I believe about 3.
Roughly.
It takes you out to about 180 million. Versus 160, so about 3 cents. So this one's probably closer to 8.
Yeah, that ain't too far away.
I mean, what's another 2 cents or 3 cents to get another school when 5 years to 10 years we're going to be wanting to build more schools because the others aren't going to last that long, the way I see going for scenario 3.
And you're also drawing in the reliability of the Mission Valley turnout with scenario 3.
I would. And we're talking about May here, not November. We're talking about pushing whatever we're suggesting now. We're trying to get that going in May, opposed to November, right? That's where we're at right now.
Ultimately, that will be a recommendation of the task force as well. So if as a task force you said we don't believe the community will support whatever plan you want to bring forward as recommendations in May, then that would need to be a part of what feedback this task force provided the board. So that there's not a requirement that it happen at a certain time. We've laid out a time frame that would allow for a May election, but if the task force feels like that's not something the community will support in May, that can potentially be a recommendation of the task force.
I know that we have to get these high priorities out the way because, they're holding back from building the new schools because right now it's Stroman and high priorities opposed to just Stroman. And I'm glad for these charts now because now I'm really putting the high priorities on the top after seeing all these numbers. And just personally here, I'm saying, do we still all agree that Stroman needs to be the one that's done right now? My problem was I'm looking at the high priorities, and I'm like, man, perhaps Stroman could wait, but then it also is $23 million. So how do y'all, feel about that? Because $23 million, but then also it's going to need to be one of the first schools that get rebuilt. So is it worth putting the $23 million in it and still going to fix it pretty soon, or how are y'all feeling?
Well, my gut feeling says, why would you want to spend that 23 million and in 5 years from now lose that 23 million when you have to spend 76 million to build a new Stroman? I'd rather go ahead and get Stroman done now because it is the biggest payback of that money that you're going to be saving.
I'm on board with that.
I would probably do scenario 2 in November and scenario 1 in May. That's how I feel about it. As far as the Mission Valley and Stroman, if the community was voting in November, but if they're going to be voting in May, I'd go with Stroman and high priority.
Justin, I agree with you. If we feel we need to go in May, I think we need scenario 1. If we can wait till November, scenario 3.
I'm going to ask Johnny, Mike, Vermeeren, and Dan, because we do need to shut this meeting down. I don't want to keep you any longer as a group, but I want to make sure that we are able to use this next week in preparation for our Tuesday the 15th meeting as effectively as possible. Dan, Johnny, Mike, is there any additional information, any questions you wish I would have asked that would help provide us with any guidance on how to bring forward additional helpful information?
I think we're doing good, sir. Thank you so much for your insight. I, listening to everyone ideas and different opinions, pros and cons. I think this task force is doing what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny.
And Dr. Bonewald, I can't think of any additional questions at this point, but I think that we've definitely gotten a lot of feedback that will, give us a little bit of direction to come up with refined scenarios, I think, based on what they told us.
Thank you, Mike. I do want to share with the group that we will have some information available to us next week involving a community survey that's being conducted right now. We're working with a group that is conducting a community opinion poll regarding potential bond election in relation to the school district. And so we will have some data to share back with you that may provide some additional guidance on what may make sense in terms of what our community would support in terms of a bond election. We'll also work through the feedback that you've given us to potentially refine some of those scenarios that we talked about, scenario 1 and 3 specifically. And we'll continue to work toward building consensus for recommendation. You guys have asked some really appropriate questions tonight in regard to timing, in regard to various options for how a proposition or propositions might be presented to the voter and what might make the most sense. And so I think that community survey information will hopefully be informative to us and help give us some additional guidance that we don't have as we sit here right now. We're in that really complex area right here. Now's the first time where I can say I wish we were all together in a room. This is the first time I've felt the limitations of the Zoom to the work that we need to do. But it's great work that you all are doing, and I just want to thank you for tonight, the insight that you've given us, and for your willingness to work late. So,
Greg,
yes.
I've got one question.
Yes, sir.
When are we going to start working on mid and long range planning? Because some of this is going to tie into it. Whatever we can address now, we have to address mid range and long range.
Wonderful question, Tony. Thank you for asking that. And so a part of our conversation, had this process gone a little quicker tonight, was going to be around those other campuses that we considered for rebuild that may not end up being within the scenario, and timeframes by which we think as a task force it may make sense to consider those for rebuild down the road, 5, 7, 10, whatever those years are in mid and long range planning. We are also working right now with the financial advisor group that previously shared out information with the task force very early on in our work to look at various scenarios for building capacity within the rate if we recognize strategically that we can only address 1 campus or 2 campuses now, but it's earmarked by this task force that it would make sense to consider these others at other intervals, 5 years, 10 years, wherever that is down the road, that we're strategic in how we would structure any bond to consider building capacity in to be able to afford that at those intervals. So that is more work for this task force. And to have really informed, specific conversations around what we would place in mid and long range priorities, it'll be helpful for us to narrow down what we consider this short range priority to be. Great question. I'll be happy to stay behind and have conversation or answer any questions that anyone may have. Again, thank you so much for your time this evening, and we will look forward to seeing you next Tuesday.
Thank you, everybody. Great job.